It was a night that felt heavy, the air thick with a strange, unsettling quiet. Mia drove along the winding back roads, barely a soul in sight, only the occasional distant glow of farmhouse lights on the horizon. She was returning from a work trip, tired but too wired to relax. The familiar rumble of her car's engine, her only companion. She glanced at her GPS, noting a slight detour it had mapped out to avoid roadwork up ahead. With a sigh, she followed it, turning onto a narrow, seemingly endless road shrouded by dense trees and thick fog. Strangely, the fog only grew thicker with every mile, swallowing her headlights. Shadows danced across her windshield, and every so often, a strange sensation prickled the back of her neck, as though someone, or something, was watching from the shadows. She turned up the volume on the radio, only to hear static. Frowning, she tried tuning to another station, but the static grew louder, an unsettling noise that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Something felt wrong, but she couldn't pinpoint what. Brushing it off, she gripped the wheel a little tighter, her only thought to get back home as quickly as possible. Just as she was starting to feel truly unnerved, a dim glow broke through the mist up ahead. A small roadside diner, its flickering neon sign barely visible. She felt a pang of relief, deciding that a quick stop for coffee might shake off the eerie unease that clung to her. She pulled into the empty lot, headlights casting long, sharp shadows against the diner's foggy windows, and made her way inside. Mia stepped inside, and immediately the air felt heavy, like the place hadn't seen a visitor in weeks. She took a few cautious steps, her boots echoing across the dingy linoleum floor, each step feeling more out of place. The tables were set perfectly, but not a single person was in sight. Odd. An old radio sat in the corner, buzzing faintly with a crackle that broke the silence every few seconds, like the diner itself was trying to speak to her. She ran a hand through her hair, glancing over her shoulder. The door was still open, and beyond it, her car sat alone in the parking lot, headlights casting a small halo of light in the dense fog. She turned back to the empty counter, tapping her fingers, just for the comfort of some sound. "Hello," she called out, her voice louder than she intended, but she felt this strange urge to fill the silence. The place felt... she couldn't quite place it, but something was off. Just as she was about to leave, a man shuffled in from the back. Older, thin, with eyes that looked off. Blank, almost, but there was something unsettling beneath his gaze. The man gave her this faint, lopsided smile, his voice low and rough. "Long drive, huh?" he asked, sliding a cup of coffee toward her before she could even ask for one. Mia returned a tight smile, polite but uneasy. Yeah, long drive," she replied, hoping he'd sense she wasn't up for small talk. But his gaze... it felt like he could see right through her. "Road's dangerous at this hour," he continued, that faint smile never faltering. "Strange things happen out there." And then, he just disappeared into the shadows at the back of the diner, leaving her alone with that ominous thought and a cup of coffee she had no intention of drinking. Mia barely waited a minute before slipping out of the diner, the unease following her like a second shadow. She felt her pulse quicken as she approached her car, fumbling with her keys. Jeez, why was she so jumpy? But that man's words stuck in her head. Strange things happen. She brushed it off as she started the engine, though, letting out a shaky breath as her headlights pierced the night. The first few miles were uneventful, just her and the narrow road, winding like a serpent through the dark. But then, a flicker in her rearview mirror. At first, she thought it was a trick of the fog, But there, right behind her car, was a figure. A person, running, keeping pace with her car. She gasped, gripping the wheel tighter, eyes darting from the road ahead to the mirror, hoping, praying the figure would disappear. But, they were gone. She blinked, heart hammering. Then, just as she dared to look forward again, her radio crackled to life. An old voice, scratchy and eerie, whispering, "Don't look back. They follow." A shiver raced down her spine. She turned up the volume, desperate for some kind of normal sound, but it was all static, buzzing in time with her heartbeat. Mia pressed her foot down on the accelerator, desperate to leave whatever this was behind her. But just as she rounded a bend, her car sputtered, jerking violently before rolling to a dead stop. She let out a groan, hitting the wheel in frustration. No way this was happening. Not here, in the middle of nowhere. She tried turning the key again, but it was useless. With a sigh, she sat back, the silence weighing down on her. And then, tap, tap, tap. Her heart stilled. She turned slowly, her breath catching as she saw a pale hand pressed against her window. The breath stuck in her throat as she traced the shape. A hand, cold and rigid, like it belonged to a statue. She let out a shudder, daring to glance at the rearview mirror, and, oh God. There, in the back seat, was a shadowy figure, staring back at her, a grin stretching impossibly wide. She closed her eyes for a second, willing it to disappear, and when she opened them, it was gone. But the dread, the sensation of being watched, didn't leave. Scrambling out of the car, Mia barely registered the chill of the night as she stumbled towards the edge of the forest. She looked back once, heart in her throat, but the car sat silent and empty. She took a step forward, and then another, each step sinking her further into the darkness. Every rustle, every snap of a twig sounded like it was echoing right behind her. She glanced back again, and there it was. Another car, identical to hers, headlights off, parked just a few feet away. She froze, her breath catching as she saw herself. Yes, herself, sitting in the driver's seat of the other car, eyes wide with terror, pounding on the glass from the inside, mouthing words she couldn't hear. Mia backed away, heart hammering as she struggled to make sense of the impossible. This wasn't real. She couldn't be seeing this, couldn't be witnessing herself, trapped in a car she was no longer inside. But the reflection in the glass was unmistakable. It was her face contorted in horror, trapped in some twisted mirror of her own reality. Every fiber of Mia's being screamed to get away, to somehow break free of whatever nightmare she'd stumbled into. She bolted from the road, crashing through the underbrush, her breaths jagged, her pulse pounding in her ears. She forced her way deeper into the forest, branches clawing at her arms, the forest seeming to grow denser with every step. Somewhere behind her, she felt a presence, a dark, watchful presence that seemed to follow her every move. After what felt like endless running, Mia broke through the trees, stumbling onto a different road. Relief washed over her, a glimmer of hope blooming in her chest as she saw headlights in the distance. She frantically waved her arms, desperate for the car to stop. But as it got closer, her blood ran cold. She recognized the car, her own, moving steadily toward her, headlights eerily bright. Inside, she saw a glimpse of herself behind the wheel, staring straight ahead with eyes that were dark, blank, and lifeless. She backed up, whispering, "No, no, no, no." But the car passed her without a sound, her own empty gaze looking right through her. With every step backward, she felt the world closing in, as though the road itself was swallowing her whole. Her escape attempt had only brought her back to the beginning, back to the same endless road. Mia's legs gave out, and she sank to the ground, eyes wide with a dawning, inescapable horror. The diner man's words echoed, haunting her mind. Roads dangerous at this hour. Strange things happen out there. She could feel it now, this dark truth sinking in. She wasn't on an ordinary road. This was a trap, a loop, a place meant to hold her forever. And now, she was part of it. As she sat there, her own headlights faded into the mist. Then, out of nowhere, another car passed her, headlights gleaming in the fog. She hid behind the trees, watching as a familiar face appeared in the driver's seat. It was her, yet again, staring blankly, following the same unchanging path. She was caught, endlessly looping through her own nightmare, her own ghost on the same doomed journey. Mia's surroundings shifted, as though her will was no longer her own. She found herself back at the diner, this time behind the counter, feeling the weight of an apron draped over her shoulders. She tried to speak, to call for help, but the words were trapped in her throat. Her reflection in the diner's glass door showed a hollow, unfamiliar version of herself, eyes as dark as the night outside. Then, headlights appeared in the parking lot, and Mia knew what she had to do. She didn't feel in control. Her actions felt more like reflex than choice. A young woman entered, glancing around with the same uneasy look Mia herself had worn just hours before. Mia's lips moved, her voice distant and monotone. "Long drive, huh? Road's dangerous at this hour." The woman hesitated, her gaze flickering with unease. Mia watched, feeling the curse pass on, knowing that she was now part of this eternal warning, another lost soul bound to trap others forever. Well, if you made it out of this story alive, consider it your lucky night. But don't leave just yet. If you enjoyed the chills and thrills, go ahead and like this video and subscribe for more eerie tales that'll keep you up at night. And if you want to be the first to step into the shadows, hit that bell icon so you never miss an upload. Got a favorite part of the story? Or maybe an idea for the next haunting adventure? Let me know down in the comments. I'm always lurking there, waiting to see what frightens you most. Until next time, stay curious, stay brave, and beware of what might be lurking just beyond the light.